Hello and welcome. It has been so long since I feel like I've done a video where I'm actually talking in it, just because I've been really enjoying the vibes of non-talking videos. Somebody just walked past my window and looked at me holding this cucumber as a microphone. Anywho, it's been so long since I've done a talking video. I've been really just enjoying the quiet videos of just doing things and just being there, doing more actions rather than talking about it. However, I have seen so many videos and I've enjoyed watching these types of videos, but then it also kind of made me think and reflect on my personal judgment towards this topic. So I decided to make a video about it. Also, excuse this piece. This artwork is one of my favorites right now, and I understand that it can be disturbing for some people, so that's why I put a warning prior to the video. But this is the picture in question. So on to this topic, and the video that I was making in reference to and will be referencing more within this video is the video by Mina Lee, and it was Mina Lee or Lay. I know she has only one E in her last name versus Lee having usually two E's in a last name, but ultimately, excuse my mispronunciation. So the video that I will be referencing to a lot in this is Mina Lee's video, Toxic Femininity, What's Up with Girl Bloggers, Female Manipulators, and Femcels, ? After watching this video, and this was the most recent video that I had watched by her, and it was her most recent video as well, the reason this video had kind of interested me or made me feel different prior to her other videos, because I am a subscriber of hers, but something that had made me feel differently about this video, and that's why I have this cucumber instead of a microphone, is because I'm inspired. But she was talking about femcels, and when she talked about femcels, that was a term that I had never heard before, and even the term incel I had never heard before, and that is ignorant on my part. I didn't know what that was. Ultimately, incels, she described incels as people, incels specifically, not femcels, but incels are people who have the desire to have sex or be intimate with someone, but don't have basically the ability. So it's more of they just can't, they don't have the range of options to pursue somebody or for somebody to reciprocate their affections, kind of. And I know I just described it in such a bizarre way, but here's the actual definition. So when she had talked about this, it had made me just open my eyes to something completely different. And I'm not going to spoil the video, but as a summary of what I will be talking about, is she talked about different aesthetics that came with the femcel movement, or with the femcel core, kind of. When talking about these aesthetics, she also talked about how these aesthetics can be dangerous for mental and physical health. So this is what has gotten me intrigued, is the aesthetic cult. The specific aesthetics that she talked about were the sad girl aesthetic, the femcel aesthetic, the chaos aesthetic, or chaotic core and things like that, and also Tumblr core. Basically just girls who are seen as being a little bit more chaotic and being able to express the things that they want to and not being ashamed of it, which you should not be ashamed of it. And this is coming from somebody who doesn't adhere to a specific aesthetic. I am one to follow any aesthetic that I feel like that day. So I don't specifically stay in cottagecore or e-girl or alt or spiritual core, crystal core. I don't know. I don't adhere strictly to any of them. Now you know the premise of the person who's making this video is that I have no bias. Along with the femcel and incel things or concepts that Mina was talking about, she had also talked about, like I said, the sad girl core and sad girl aesthetic. And my problem started here. Not with Mina, but with aesthetics in general. I feel as if aesthetics have become a cult within itself, and people make an aesthetic their defining character. So Mina briefly spoke upon Y2K and growing up in the early 2000s. Being skinny was at that time very popular. So a lot of movies at the time talked about eating disorders, and at the time, in reality, people were actually going through eating disorders so that they could further succumb to the aesthetic or succumb to the bodily standards of society at the time. In Mina's most recent video, she delves briefly into sad girl core and sad girl aesthetic and kind of goes into how depression is romanticized within that aesthetic, and I completely agree. And like I said, a lot of this is from inspiration of her video, so I will be, of course, quoting a lot of her video or talking about her video a lot. But she went into femcels and how the idea of femcels were women who were sad and almost rambunctious and outrageous and were just doing things without needing help from other people. So rather than getting help, they went basically off the rails, went unhinged. This also goes into the sad girl aesthetic because with the romanticization of depression, in the sad girl aesthetic, it's more of sitting within that sadness, and even people who try to adapt to this aesthetic just romanticize and try to mimic sadness and depression on themselves, which could ultimately lead to them having depression within reality aside from the aesthetic that they're trying to obtain. But that's my problem, is people take an aesthetic and run with it. With the sad girl aesthetic, I completely understand how you see the beauty within people who are openly sad and open about their mental health, whether sad or happy. However, my problem is you intentionally going into this aesthetic and then it ultimately ruining your mental and physical health. So, for example, when Mina was talking about the early 2000s and how at that time the beauty standard was to be really skinny and there were eating disorders, that's falling into a negative physical health because you are doing negative things to your body just to obtain this aesthetic. And another example with the sad girl core is portraying yourself as sad and then maybe ultimately ending up with depression because you are mimicking that sadness and you're mirroring that sadness. Then it can maybe even become you. And I do understand that the sad girl aesthetic can be encouraging to women because this could be a part of some type of movement where we as women are usually seen as emotional. So you being completely open with your sadness and you being completely open with your emotions is great. It's really helping the movement. But at the same time, I feel like it's doing something negative for each individual person. Speaking personally from someone who is evidently from the Black community, Black people are frequently ostracized for talking about their mental health, and I won't be making this a racial issue, however, a racial issue, but I will be saying that mental health should not be taken lightly. And so for the sad girl aesthetic to be within popularity right now, I just hope people take it a little bit more serious. If you are actually sad, try and get help if you have the privilege of doing so, but also try and make sure to take care of yourself and not fall into, just because it's an aesthetic, that your mind has to fall into the aesthetic itself as well. My ultimate problem with the aesthetic cult is that just as we as a society are getting somewhere when it comes to not everything needing a label, we are now putting labels on things that can ultimately deteriorate our mental and physical health, especially for the young people that are coming up behind us. Another example is the that girl trend.
Here we go again.
Lynn Trong, if I'm pronouncing it wrong, I'm so sorry. But Lynn talked on one of her videos, and it was just a relaxing video, so it was just something, she was just talking about different things while doing skincare. She never talked about it in a whole video about it. But she had talked about how the that girl trend aggravated her because people were doing self-care in the name of productivity rather than doing self-care for themselves. And I want to make a whole separate video about that, but I would also like to elaborate on it here as well, because though the that girl trend is aesthetically pleasing and it is intended for good, the that girl trend has somehow come to being now where you have to be fit, thin, and healthy 24/7 in the name of productivity rather than for your own mental health and for your own self-care. And I completely understand. During the COVID era of 2020 and 2022, people were left without things to do. So when you were by yourself at home, it completely makes sense how you want to upgrade yourself and do better with your self-care and mental health. However, the trend has now come to that you are not that girl if you don't meditate, or if you don't journal, or if you don't drink green smoothies. It's the thing of, you are not that girl just because you don't fit into that criteria of that girl. However, you can take care of yourself and do great self-care without drinking green smoothies and meditating. The that girl trend was intended for good, but has somehow steered to, if you don't do these things, or if you don't have the privilege to do these things, then your productivity level is way lower than those who can. We unfortunately, as an unstable society, see an aesthetic and swear ourselves by it and curse anything that we were before it, which I personally think is rooted in insecurities, but I digress. Being a feminist or supporting women and enjoying yourself as a woman has nothing to do with you fitting strictly into an aesthetic such as a gym girl or girl boss or that girl or sad girl and being unhinged. You being a feminist yourself or supporting women or supporting you yourself as a woman has nothing to do with you being sad and unhinged, or you being that girl or a gym girl, or you being somebody that loves crystals and is a spiritual girl. We need to get rid of the whole labels of a woman, because you can be whatever you want, whatever day that you want. When you fall into the cult of being an aesthetic is you put yourself within a box, and you need to allow yourself room to grow and room to be wherever you want, whoever you want, at any time that you want. You shouldn't be strictly putting yourself into a box that can ultimately hinder your growth, hinder your mental health, and hinder your physical health. Whether you're just now getting out of your villain era or just now stepping in, that's fine. The whole part of being a part of an aesthetic is for the physical and visual pleasing part of it. It has nothing to do with your mental health, so please don't make it a part of that. When it comes to the sad girl aesthetic, like I previously said, is people are now weaving their mental health within something that was only supposed to be aesthetically and physically, visually pleasing. And the same thing when it comes to that girl, is even though you want to improve your mental health, you might actually be more insecure about your productivity if you haven't accomplished one of the things that was in the that girl criteria. In modern society, aesthetic becomes a cult that you have to ride or die for, or is something that just can't be taken lightly nowadays. However, your body and your mental health should not have to succumb to your aesthetic changes every month. All of this to say is that I hope that aesthetics become something once again, lightly taken. Something as if you can pull out a file and be that day and put it back when you are ready to come back to it. I think aesthetics nowadays are so serious where your mental health becomes incorporated into it, and then unfortunately your physical health goes into it as well. And your body should not have to succumb to those things just for an aesthetic. An aesthetic is never meant to be that way. You are you yourself aside from the aesthetic that you follow, and I hope that you are nonetheless you, whether you are this aesthetic last week, this one this week, or the next one next week. Like, I was just thinking, like, aesthetics are just becoming so serious and so dangerous now that I feel like I want to talk about it. Like I said, I follow different aesthetics every day. Like yesterday, I feel like I was in the Y2K vibes. This time, I feel like I'm doing a little bit of a cottagecore, and maybe tomorrow I'll be old. But like, my mind doesn't follow the visual aesthetic that I decide to portray that day. So I hope that everyone can get to that place as well, because it can be quite dangerous if every part of you follows just this one view that you romanticize. Anyways, I hope that you liked this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you do enjoy, go ahead and subscribe and like the video. Like the video if you want to see more cucumbers and more grotesque art. Maybe I will do a art video about some of my favorite art pieces that I have hanging within my room. I don't know. Comment down below any ideas. I'm not running out of them yet, but eventually I will. So, anyways, did you enjoy this video? Well, I tried.